With that, let's jump into love-hate, and we kick it off with the running backs. Kenneth Walker against Arizona. Obviously, this is a great matchup, Matthew, for Kenneth Walker in this game.
Yeah, it's the Cardinals. No team in the NFL has allowed more rushing yards than the Arizona Cardinals. They also give the second most fantasy points to running backs. And running backs that get at least 15 touches against the Cards are averaging 22.8 fantasy points per game. Kenneth Walker has reestablished himself as the lead dog in that Seahawks backfield. They're using Charbonnet as more of this kind of a change of pace guy. So expect a heavy workload for Ken Walker this weekend. He's my number 5 running back.
Yeah, I will never understand how the Eagles contrived to lose that game against the Cardinals from 21-6 up at home at halftime in a game they needed to win the NFC East. And no Eagles running back really got going against the Cardinals, but I have to think that that is the outlier, and you have to look at the full season sample where they've been very bad against the run.
And within the same game, James Conner makes the love list. So 2 top 5 running backs here, Matthew, as Conner has Seattle's defense, which has also struggled this month.
They're allowing the 5th most fantasy points to running backs over the last 4 weeks. And in fact, during that stretch, running backs that face the Seahawks averaging over 5.2 yards per carry. Like, you can run on Seattle, which is, again, to your point, Jay, I don't understand why Philadelphia didn't just, run DeAndre Swift 30 times in that game. It was a weird one as well. But James Conner, who's been really productive down this stretch, he's helped a lot of fantasy managers, 2 titles. And so if you're playing this week, we expect another big workload and a successful one from James Conner, who's running back 3 for me this week.
Yep, number 31 rushing defense in the NFL in Seattle.
A couple others receiving votes. Jaylen Warren against the Ravens. Now, the Ravens obviously resting a ton of people in this game. The Steelers are favored in that game. And then Devin Singletary there, Matthew, in a massive game for the Colts and the Texans.
Yeah, for sure. So since week 15, 75% of the Houston Texans running back touches have gone to Motor Singletary. Teams that face the Colts this year averaging the 2nd most running back carries per game. They're going to want to establish the run, use all the cliches you want. Over the last 4 weeks, Colts allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So Devin Singletary, I think, is a high-end flex. And then you see Jaylen Warren coming in at running back 19 for me as well. To your point, Ravens have nothing to play for. They're resting a lot of their starters. They've already announced that as well. And over the last month, the Ravens allow 5.3 yards per carry to opposing running backs. 4 straight games with at least 4 receptions for Jaylen Warren. Mason Rudolph not scared to dump it off to Jaylen Warren. It's weird as this is to say, it feels like the Steelers' passing offense has found some stability with Mason Rudolph. I don't know that it's success, but it at least looks like a competent passing offense under Mason Rudolph.
It does feel like the rug is going to get pulled underneath Pittsburgh on Saturday, doesn't it? I don't really buy the Mason Rudolph thing, but he has been, to his credit, he's been very solid in his starts. And the one thing about the Ravens is that they have an all-world defense, but it is built on an all-world pass defense. You cannot throw on the Ravens. You can run on them. They're like an average rushing defense. Just no one gets a chance to run because they're always trailing against Baltimore. So I agree with that. And also, Indianapolis' run defense. That team just can't tackle at the moment. And Grover Stewart back the past few weeks has helped a little bit, but still, I mean, they got completely shredded by Atlanta in particular a couple of weeks ago.
I actually like the Ravens' backups getting points in that game.
No, I really do.
I think they built a scheme that there'll be a drop-off, but they built a scheme that they'll play them tough down the wire.
There's a reason. I mean, again, Mason Rudolph has been competent.
Yes.
He's looked better just because what we're used to is Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, who have looked brutal this year, right? But he's not a good quarterback.
No. And here's the thing, too, and we've talked about this the past couple of days. Yes, the Ravens are going to be resting guys. You can't rest the whole team. There's only so many spots on the roster. You know, you have so many inactives, and guys who are going to be resting are probably going to be Odell Beckham, and Lamar Jackson's not going to play. You can't just get rid of Marlon Humphrey, Jadeveon Clowney, Roquan Smith, all of these
Kyle
guys.
Hamilton, exactly.
These guys have to play, and if they're going to play, they're not just going to completely treat it like a preseason game, given that the Steelers do need this one.
And starters are backups. The Ravens would love to keep the Steelers out of the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
they hate them.
Right.
Those two teams hate each other. Yep. So either way, we like Jaylen Warren this week.
We move over to the hate list with Javante Williams. Jay, the problem with Javante right now, his snap count just continues to go downward.
Continues to go downward, going up against a really tough Raiders defense that I know Jonathan Taylor had a good game against them, but it wasn't super efficient. He just got a ton of volume and was able to get in the end zone. So this Raiders defense has been the best in the NFL in the second half of the season, which is crazy to say, but that's the level they're playing at. So they're just a very difficult team to run on.
3 straight games where he's played, to your point, under 50% of the snaps. He's averaging single-digit fantasy points in that time frame. And the Raiders, under Antonio Pierce, have played really good defense. Just to give you a stat that backs up exactly what you're saying here, Jay, they allow the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs over the last month. I mean, the Raiders are playing really good defense. So you've got Javante Williams on an offense where he's not getting a ton of touches in a tough matchup. It's hard to think about him in anywhere near your lineup. He's running back 31 for me this week.
Yep. And this guy, he's starting to finally get his due. He's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, but Max Crosby should be top 3 on ballots. He is. And the thing that makes him special, I think we know he's a great pass rusher. He gets his sacks, but against the run, he's an absolute monster. When you look at his run stops, his tackles for loss, so he's a very tough guy to go up against every week.
Connor, I know you talk to a lot of general managers as part of your scouting process. Just curious, what are your feelings? Does Antonio Pierce keep this job? Have you gotten a sense from around the league? As you talk to a lot of your sources?
It's trending the right way for him. It really is. There's a belief there that he has a legitimate shot. And usually it's never hire the interim coach. I think he's going into this process because they'll interview people with a leg up on everyone they're going to interview. I think the biggest question for Pierce is, do they get the GM candidate they want with him there? Because a lot of times you hire pairings,
right?
And nobody knows. Truly, this is something people just don't know because this has been such a rapid ascension for Pierce. Would a GM candidate that they view with a very positive light say, "Oh no, I'd want him to be my head coach"? And I'm not leading one way or the other. There might be a guy that says, "I'm blown away by what he's done," but ownership loves Antonio Pierce.
Rightfully so. And I'll say this: if Pierce does not get this job, I wouldn't be shocked if he got a head coaching job somewhere else. It's been such an impressive turnaround for the Raiders, and they've clearly played so hard for him, and the players are campaigning for him.
Yep.
Like, let me put it this way, I don't know if he'll necessarily get a head coaching job. He'll be interviewed. He'll absolutely get some looks.
Yep.
So, yes.
It's been one of the most underrated stories of the season. The way this Raiders defense has turned into, it's been the best defense in the NFL the second half of the season. This was a group that people thought coming into the year would definitely be a bottom 10 unit in football, and they've been an absolute monster. And it's not like they're doing it just against bad teams. Like Patrick Mahomes could do nothing against them in Arrowhead a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I think why he has the leg up is ownership sees the style that he has them playing and thinks that's the way they can get back in this division is they play excellent defense, both phases, stopping the run and stopping the pass, and they run the ball. And when you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Sean Payton's going to get his guy, probably in this draft, one of the top 4 guys or someone along that lines, they're pass-happy teams. So you kind of have to it's a zigzag, metaphor in a sense, where they have to do something different to stay alive in that division. He's the guy that could do that.
Yep.
So great for future Josh Jacobs if he's back there as well.
Justin Fields in Vegas.
It's
That'd
interesting.
be a spot for him.
That if the problem is they might win too many games where they don't get Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, forget Caleb Williams and Drake May. That's a really interesting one.
He's got to go somewhere if he's not going to be in
Chicago.
Chicago.
I would put them as one of the top 3 favorite teams to get Justin Fields.
Are those obviously Williams and May are 1-2, depending on who you talk to, but are Daniels and Penix widely considered 3-4?
Yeah, and they're going in the top 10, I think. I think we've landed. I think we've landed with 4 quarterbacks in the top 10. And then in the first round, you could still have a J.J. McCarthy, a Bo Nix. Like, this is a heavy, heavy quarterback year.
I'm out on McCarthy.
Yeah, that's a different tier. Different tier. They tried to hide him.
He's made some plays, but he gets some
Jim
moments of
Harbaugh
madness.
says he's the greatest quarterback in Michigan history.
Yeah, I like Brady. Yeah, I like Tom
Depending where
Brady.
Jim goes,
sort of would go, right?
he might be able to bring him with him.
Absolutely true.
Another
I think Jim Harbaugh is an NFL head coach
It's
2
happening.
weeks from now.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
With Justin Herbert, I would suspect.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's the right fit. They just have to be able to pay him, and that ownership typically doesn't pay very heavily paid coaches. We'll see.
Okay, yeah, we'll see.
All right, our next running back on the hate list, Tai Chandler. It feels like some of the flame has gone out here, Barry, with Tai Chandler, and he goes into a Detroit matchup that's a very pass funnel kind of defense, not a run funnel.
Tough match. Listen, Tai Chandler against the Packers last week, I think, was certainly disappointing. Over the last 2 weeks, for whatever reason, they're using a lot more Madison than, candidly, I think they should. But just 11 touches over the last 2 weeks. He's averaging under 11 touches, Tai Chandler is, in his last 2 games. You mentioned Detroit, right? No team in the NFL has allowed fewer rushing yards per game than the Detroit Lions as well. No running back has rushed for more than 67 yards, I should say, against the Lions. You think about Week 16, when Tai Chandler had become a thing, he faced these same Lions, had 17 rushing yards. So Chandler, who they're using Madison more in the passing attack, I don't understand that, but they are. And so in a game in which the Lions, the only thing here, the only caveat here is that we don't know how much the Lions are going to play their starters. The Lions are pretty much locked into their spot. So what's the motivation here? Now, they haven't been in the playoffs in a long time. Dan Campbell's rough, tough, we're going to eat their kneecaps and, bite their children and, all the stuff that he did, drink their blood and, and wear their skin and, he's a football guy. He's shout out to Pardon My Take. He's a football guy. And I just, so I feel like I lean toward the Lions playing more of their guys than not, and certainly wanting to play against a division rival, but that's the only saving grace, is that it might be some backups here, but I'm nervous about Chandler. He's just inside my top 30 this week.
Snaps going progressively down, and I think so much of the Tai Chandler hype was built out of, one, how bad Alexander Mattison had looked, and then two, just that he was so dominant against the Bengals, who without DJ Reader might have the single worst run defense in the NFL. So now going up against a team where, like, the Dallas game was perfectly instructive. Dak did whatever he wanted through the air against Detroit, and Tony Pollard couldn't do anything on the ground. So this is as you mentioned, Connor, a pass funnel defense. And Nick Mullins, for all his sins, he can throw it down the field. Like, he will make the throws. It's just every seventh throw is madness.
Yeah, but he believes he can.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, but yes, he can throw down the field, except apparently not to Justin Jefferson.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to it's a Thursday show. We've got a little bit of time. So my last Sunday night, my Football Night in America, my 3-play, my DraftKings 3-play, my parlay, I had Jaden Reed over on the receptions. I had Tucker Kraft over on the receiving yards. And then my easy leg was Justin Jefferson and alt line at 60 receiving yards.
Yeah.
He had at least 84 receiving yards in every healthy game this year. It's Justin Jefferson against the Packers with no Jair Alexander. 60 yards. Like, that's the layup leg.
Yeah.
Like the ones that I'm sort of sweating a little bit. Kraft and Reed hit theirs easily. Justin Jefferson finishes with 59 receiving yards.
It's a brutal bad beat.
That's a tough one.
59.
Yeah.
59, and you're like, oh, that's a bad beat. Oh, sure, it's a bad beat. But at least you weren't in front of 17 million people giving that bet out.
Yeah. Just on that game, that was a really interesting live betting game, because it became clear after like 3 drives that Jaron Hall was just deer in the headlights.
Yes.
I know he's a rookie, and hopefully he will develop and get better, but
that
it was
a lot
clear
worse than we all thought.
And the fact as well that, like, that was effectively a do or die game for Minnesota, and Jaron Hall's passing yards prop just stays up the whole time. It doesn't get priced in the percentage chance that he could get benched. And then all of a sudden his passing prop just goes from 200 to whatever he ended up at, 50 or whatever.
Right.
And so when there is the opportunity for a player to get benched, you can bet the live under on their passing yards. So it's just one thing for people to look out for next time that's in play.
Yeah.
One last note on our running backs here. Kyron Williams will not play in Week 18 against the 49ers. A very important note, as a lot of guys are rested. As Matthew said, we'll get into more of those tomorrow.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.